you could make the case that he's one of the great right-handed hitters in the game's history.
Talk about losses. The Dodgers and the Padres have no idea what that is. Which team's going to lose first?
Maybe neither, right? No, only kidding. I don't know, Eric. The Dodgers are in Philadelphia. That's where I am this weekend with AJ, by the way. We have the game on FS1 tomorrow. So that's a tough opponent, clearly. But both teams are quite good, it seems. The Dodgers we knew would be good. I don't know that there was as much certainty about the Padres. They didn't do much this offseason. They were kind of trying to stave off making trades and just keeping their team together, and they did. So I like, obviously, what I'm seeing from them, not just from the sheer performances, but the style of play. They're really excelling at situational hitting. They're also running a lot, and it just seems that they're kind of clicking on all cylinders. Now, the Dodgers are the Dodgers. They're going to do the same kind of thing, but the way the Padres are playing, it's even maybe a step beyond where they were at the end of 24, and that's saying something.
You look at the Braves, they haven't won a game yet. Now, listen, they played the Padres and they played the Dodgers, 4 with the Padres, 3 with the Dodgers in some of those games. Talk a little about, like, where are these guys right now? A couple injuries aren't helping. It just looks like, listen, they played some good teams. They got the Marlins coming up. I think they'll bounce back. But ultimately, it doesn't seem like they're clicking right now on all cylinders.
You're right, Todd. And one thing I want to point out, there's been a lot of talk. Well, no 0-7 team has ever made the postseason. Yeah, well, guess what? There are 12 teams in the postseason now. It's easier than ever to make the postseason. I don't preclude the Braves or expect that they will not make the postseason simply because they've started badly. Now, the questions you raise are fair questions. They've already lost Profar, Reynaldo Lopez for an extended period of time. Their bullpen has gone through some changes already. It wasn't put together all that well, it seems, and they're going to need to kind of keep scrambling to find the right pieces. So there are some causes for concern. The offense has not performed. We all know that, but I would attribute that more to good pitching and maybe some slow starts by some of the players. This offense is going to be good. 2 years ago, it was breaking records. Acuna is going to come back. Sean Murphy's going to come back even before that. And then ultimately, with the pitching staff, you're going to get Strider back. Their rotation is thinner now without Lopez. There's no doubt about it. But I still see them as a formidable team, maybe even a wild card team. Remember last year how poorly the Astros started, the Mets started. The lesson that I learned yet again in watching those teams was it's a long season and things will play out the way they're supposed to.
Yeah, you're saying that spoken like somebody who picked the Braves to make it to the World Series. We get it, Ken. We get it. You're just
I
trying
don't
to
know who you're talking about, Eric.
make sure your and AJ's pick just stay afloat. I want to go back to the Padres though, actually, and Jackson Merrill's extension that he got. Does this put this team, because you said, oh, this team was trying to stay afloat in the offseason, and now all of a sudden they came up with $130 million. And I know some money's coming off the books, but this was the same team that was looking to get rid of possibly a Dylan Cease, possibly a Luis Arise because of the $10 million they were making.
Well, Jackson Merrill's not getting all 135 at once. It's over a period of time, and actually this deal is considered by most people in the industry to be rather team friendly. So in locking this guy up, and he seems to be someone who is going to be not just a star, but maybe a superstar in the game, they did it in a way that really is kind of financially logical for them and quite feasible. So as opposed to some of their other deals, which looked inflated at the time, Tatis maybe not, as it turns out, they should be fine with this deal. And ultimately, once their ownership thing resolves, and I don't know how it's going to resolve, it's kind of a mess, but they're drawing $3 million plus. Their town is alive, and I would expect, while maybe they spent beyond their means a little bit, or maybe even a lot, they'll figure it out as they go along. And these contracts, some of them, Machado, I guess, would be one. Once they get into the latter years, like all of these big contracts, then they become perhaps problematic. But at the same time, they've got it going right now. And it's actually an example of how you can spend money to make money and investing in your team and how it can reap dividends for the franchise in general.
Ken, how do you look at some of these recent extensions in terms of it being good or bad for the game and even individuals? You know, it's hard. You you look at, a fan perspective and say, great, you've got this player locked in here for a while. Of course, industry perspective sometimes, like even for me this week, talking to some players and agents, they're like, oh, they left so much money on the table, Merrill, Campbell as well. And I asked them to elaborate. And, some of the responses have to do with the age. That's what you hear a lot about, right? Because that's what you always have to consider with free agency. Guys like Vladdy Jr. hitting free agency early, Soto, et cetera, at this young age. They pointed to, I think both Campbell and Merrill would be free agents if the options get picked up at around 32. And I was kind of told that's the sweet spot where teams kind of hit the brakes on position player deals that are going to be long-term. Like they're not going to sign a 10-year deal at that point. So what do you think about the way that it's being carved to get them to that certain number where front offices are like, you're going to be on your way down now?
Couple things here, Scott. One, Merrill could have been a free agent at 26. So there is some talk that he left, I don't know, 150 million on the table, 200 million on the table. And yet he was adamant about he wants not necessarily all the money. He wants his team to build around him. And that's putting a lot of faith in ownership to do that. But that's the position he took. And as I said on Fair Territory yesterday, with the extensions, it's always a little bit tricky because it's two sides to every story. And while in Merrill's case, he had what you would think was a valid reason for wanting to take the deal he did. He said, hey, I don't need all the money. I want my team to be strong. You can make the argument, certainly, that he's hurting other players by taking a deal like that. So other teams can use that as kind of a tool against their own players when those negotiations are taking place. With Christian Campbell, with any young player, a lot of times when someone or a team throws a big number in front of them, and go back to Acuna even with the 100 million, and that was a deal, obviously, that was undervalued. These players can think, and their parents can think, well, all right, Mr. Agent, how are you going to guarantee me that my guy's ever going to make that much money, that my son is ever going to make that much money in the game? You can't guarantee it. But here it is. It's guaranteed. Now, it's somewhat short-sighted, in my opinion, to think that way for position players, because if you go year by year, the chances of you getting seriously hurt are not that great, certainly not as great as they are for pitchers, and you ultimately might be selling yourself short. But sometimes there are financial circumstances that come into play with a family. Sometimes there is familial pressure that comes into play. So it's often difficult to judge from afar and be too critical from afar. And I hear all the talk from the agents and the people on the players' side as well. And I understand exactly where they're coming from. But in some cases, too, you have smaller agencies and they're afraid of losing the player to the larger agencies. Well, if that kind of conduct would stop, and it never will, maybe you wouldn't have some of these deals getting struck. But a lot of times, smaller agents are afraid of losing their players because that's what happens all the time in this sport.
All right, talk about the sport right now with Aaron Judge in it. Is Aaron Judge doing and this is hard for me to even ask, is he underappreciated for how good he is? Because it's almost like teams are sitting there going, no way he does this again. No way he hits another homer. No way he goes 3 for 4. We just struck him out last night. And then there he is again. Whack, dinger.
Even Aaron Boone said last night that sometimes he takes Judge for granted, which you would think as his manager would never happen. But if you're seeing it every day and he only gets a double and not a homer, you're like, hey, why didn't the ball go over the fence? I don't know that he's underappreciated. Everyone seems to know who Aaron Judge is. He won the MVP last year, of course. And the only thing missing with him right now is that postseason dominance, which he has not achieved. And I'm sure that is driving him. Obviously, he wants to be great in the regular season as well, but that other question is going to linger. And that's the way the game is, right? But in terms of who he is right now and who he has been for, I don't know, the better part of his career, you could make the case that he's one of the great right-handed hitters in the game's history. Is he the greatest? No, I would not say he's the greatest. But if this keeps up a couple more years, he's going to have a case to be at least in that conversation if he doesn't have that case right now. So it's kind of cool to watch him because remember last year he started slowly and put together a massive season. This season he started much better, and who knows what might be ahead.
I want to talk a little bit about the Cubs here. Reading your article with a couple other people as well. They are the money-making machine, first of all, third highest in revenue They are absolutely dominating the game in that. But my question to you is, why aren't they paying these players to come over here and have one of these kind of LA Dodger kind of type teams and go after the National League? That's my biggest concern.
That's the question we raised in the article, and I wrote it with Patrick Mooney and Sahadev Sharma, the host of Cubs Territory, I believe, or Northside Territory. And that is essentially it, Todd. That's what we were posing in there. And other teams are willing to deficit spend. They're willing to defer money. They're willing to take on additional partners. The Cubs have not been one of those teams, and that is one of the reasons why they perhaps are not spending to the levels that some people might expect. Now, granted, they own the ballpark. They have to keep the ballpark going and renovate and do all the things you need to do to keep a ballpark running, operation costs, all of that. And there are other expenses associated with running a team as well. So it's not necessarily always an even equation, money in, money out in terms of Major League payroll. But at the same time, it is certainly fair to ask, as we've been asking for quite some time now, why this team is at one level with its revenues and at another level with its payroll. It's third, as you mentioned, in revenues, 12th in payroll. That's a disparity that has fans kind of wondering what the heck is going on, and rightly so. And they're going to face another test case, as we mentioned in the story. Kyle Tucker. They acquired him with 1 year to go, like the Yankees with Juan Soto last year. Most likely he goes free agent. Do they keep him after giving up what they gave up for him? And it's an ongoing question with the Cubs. And I don't know that we can expect them to spend like the Dodgers and Yankees, but could we expect them to spend more than the Diamondbacks, which they aren't doing right now? That's probably a reasonable expectation.
Follow up here, Ken. I mean, I know this has been talked about a little bit. I believe Jed Hoyer is on the last year of his deal. Quite simply, if they don't make the playoffs, do you think that they will look in another direction? Because there's a money factor here, and I encourage everyone to check out the article in The Athletic. And then the farm system is definitely starting to churn a little bit more now, but they seem to be in win now mode, especially with Tucker for 1 year and not making the playoffs for the last few years, and not probably having as much homegrown talent, especially pitching wise, as they would have anticipated over the rebuild that they were going through. So what are your thoughts from a front office perspective on where things stand and the heat they're feeling?
Certainly when any executive, coach, manager, player is in the last year of his contract, there's a different element of perspective. And we'll see how this plays out. Jed Hoyer, you can argue, has spent more money than any team in the Central, and it really hasn't worked out. This is since he's been head of baseball operations. He, of course, was working under Theo Epstein during the great years as well. Okay, but at the same time, there have been handcuffs. That's one of the terms a person that we quoted in the story used, handcuffs, put on him. They didn't sign Matt Chapman. They didn't sign Alex Bregman. I don't expect them to sign Tucker. So while they've done certain things, yes, to spend more money than other clubs, and yes, you can argue they shouldn't be a team that in the division with the Milwaukee Brewers, Cincinnati Reds, Pittsburgh Pirates, and St. Louis Cardinals ever has a problem because they still are the most financially robust of those clubs. At the same time, they have done some things that, frankly, are questionable with regard to their payroll. So if Jed Hoyer is let go, if they don't have a successful season, and there's every chance that they might, every likelihood even that they will. But if they don't, yeah, you might be able to look at him if you're ownership and say, we'd like a new voice to head our baseball operations. But if that happens, I am quite certain people, not just in the media, but people all over the industry, fans as well, will look at this and say, whoa, ownership is the issue here as much as the head of baseball operations.
Hey everybody, be sure to like and subscribe for more content.
We're back here every weekday, all year long, so do not miss an episode.
The videos are coming in all day. Here's another video you might enjoy.
Baseball the way it should be covered.